Hey there, thanks for joining me on this episode of Tropical Weather Impact. It's Tuesday, September the 9th. We're one day away from the official peak of hurricane season, and extremely happy to report there's nothing we're tracking out there in the Atlantic Basin. So coming up on this Tropical Weather Impact, I'm going to talk about Hurricane Betsy back in 1965. That was 60 years ago. It made landfall on this day, the night of September 9th. It made landfall in southeast Louisiana as one of the most destructive hurricanes here in our region. We're going to rehash that. We're also going to talk about hurricane, or rather Kiko now, which is off in the Atlantic and off in the Pacific rather, and we'll talk about the Atlantic too. Let's start with Betsy, because this was the storm for southeast Louisiana that many people referenced up until Hurricane Katrina. And for people down in the bayou parishes like Houma and Thibodaux, this is the storm they referenced until Hurricane Ida in 2021 became their next notable storm. Betsy was an interesting hurricane, and I always use Betsy as an example of you don't stop tracking a storm until you are for certain that it's either gone and made a turn or it has dissipated. Betsy did some interesting stuff. Started as a weak system traveling northeast. You know, you see a system traveling like this in late August, you're thinking, probably it's going to go out to sea. Well, then it did another little loop down, and you see it turning again. You think, okay, we've escaped it again. And then it stalls out, does a loop, completely 180, goes into South Florida, and then makes landfall in southeast Louisiana on September the 9th. Now, back in 1965, their tracking abilities were far less superior, obviously, than what we have now. I mean, the satellite images were hardly anything what they are now. They didn't have the same modeling. They didn't have a lot of things we have now to track these things. And so I can only imagine just a nightmare how it was to track this thing across the Atlantic and across the Gulf Basin here. A closer look at the track here in southeast Louisiana, the storm making landfall the night of September the 9th, this powerful hurricane racing in when the sun had set, just terrifying for these people. As this storm came in, it made landfall as a Cat 4 right around Grand Isle. The heart of Betsy, where the center of the storm actually went, was through the heart of Lafourche Parish. Very similar track initially to what Hurricane Ida did back in 2021. Then it made its moved up towards Baton Rouge, Category 1 winds, and then eventually up into northern Louisiana. For New Orleans and down into Plaquemines Parish, the biggest problem was from storm surge. And this was really the storm that showed us we've got to have better levee systems. And after this, they did start doing things to build bigger levees and more protection for the city of New Orleans. Of course, it wasn't enough, because we know in 2005, an even powerful and bigger hurricane in nature will overwhelm those levees. And so when you look at Betsy's track here, I mean, this really is one of the worst tracks you can have for New Orleans. Anytime you're getting that water funneled into the Lake Bourne area, Lake Pontchartrain on the east bank of Plaquemines Parish, the water just piled up in these areas and led to really extensive flooding in St. Bernard, eastern New Orleans Parish, the lower 9th Ward after the levees failed, and water reached the depths over 8 feet in parts of the city. Betsy was also an interesting storm financially, because it was the first billion-dollar storm we've ever had on record here. It caused a tremendous amount of devastation from the bayou parishes into New Orleans, river parishes from the wind and things like that. And so Betsy, on this day, September 9th, the night of September 9th in 1965. Here on this day in 2005, we don't have any big tropical threats. The only named system I'm tracking between the Pacific and the Atlantic is Tropical Storm Kiko. There ain't much left of this. It's moving into cooler waters right now. You can see all the showers and storms are getting blown away from that center. It is luckily well to the northeast of Hawaii, 245 miles away. They do have some rough seas here, and that's going to be the problem with Kiko as it travels just north of the islands. Seas are going to stay rough the next few days. Here we are today, here we are tonight, and into Wednesday, the storm is continuing to move off to the northeast away from Hawaii. So if you've got vacation plans there, we don't expect any significant problems, but you're probably not in the water for the next few days. You've got waves upwards of 8 to maybe 10 feet right there for parts of the island. Now on the other side of the island, you're watching for a lot calmer conditions, maybe some rip currents, but this northern side of all the islands there, going to be rocking and rolling. All right, let's talk about the Atlantic. If it was September the 9th, I would typically be not only tracking something for potential development, but a storm for development. You have to go back a long ways to not get something on the map on September the 10th. I think back in 1994 was the last time that we had a completely quiet basin around September the 10th. It shows you how rare it is for us to not have anything. Now there's a couple things, and meteorologists, we're still trying to figure out why these things happen. We know one of the biggest problems right now is stability. Water temperatures across the basin, yeah, they are warmer than average in a lot of spots, but it's the configuration of the water temperatures. They're warmer in the subtropics. The Gulf is boiling hot. It's way cooler down here. I think we've got stability problems because of that. And what I mean by stability is the opposite of a thunderstorm. A thunderstorm forms because there is cold air sitting above warm air. Warm air wants to rise, you get showers and storms. But whenever you've got a stable atmosphere in the deep tropics, those showers and storms can't form. The atmosphere is stabilized, and even if showers and storms are moving into that stable atmosphere, they're not able to persist. Now, I'm not speaking like this is a bad thing. This is a wonderful thing for us that live in hurricane-prone areas. That means we don't have to worry about anything, but as a meteorologist, you're trying to figure these things out and what happens and why it's happening. And so these are things that are going to be studied. It shows you there are still a lot of things we are learning about meteorology, and the big question that remains is, are we going to have to reanalyze how we try to forecast these seasons on if they're going to be busy or not? Now, I say all that, we are still very much in the heart of hurricane season, and just because it's quiet right now doesn't mean it's going to be completely absent of any storms the rest of the season. There are some tropical waves out here. Everything's fairly suppressed. You can see showers and storms come up and down, up and down. We've got an upper level low with showers and storms. We've got this frontal trough. There's actually been a low pressure spinning right off the coast of Florida, but it's non-tropical, and so it just shows you that for September the 9th, if we're not tracking any of these areas of disturbed weather for potential development, there's seriously something going wrong with the Atlantic Basin and its ability to produce storms. Again, it's not a bad thing. Maybe we never meet Gabrielle. That'd be great, but I do assume, and I think it's a good bet, that we have more storms that are going to form this 2025 hurricane season. We are at our peak here. Tomorrow is the official peak, so we're one day away from it. September as a whole and October can still feature plenty of storms. We get into these oscillations of active and inactive periods. We're in an inactive one, obviously, right now. Maybe towards the end of this month in early October, we'll transition. So here's what we've had so far. I love this graphic because it really paints a picture on how these seasons play out. This is this year specifically. We've had everything's been a tropical storm except Hurricane Aaron. It was a major Cat 5. It was nearly a record-breaking Cat 5 with how strong it got and how low the pressure got. It was a tiny little eye. So do we fill in the rest of these slots as we go into October, maybe the end of this month, and into October and early November? The past couple of seasons have been backloaded. Let me show you this. This is from last year. Notice something similar. It was just a little bit off. Last year, we had Beryl, which was the earliest Category 5 on record in the Atlantic Basin. It formed in late June and was a Cat 5 in early July. Unheard of. Most of July went quiet. August, we had two hurricanes, Debbie and Ernesto, and then we went quiet for a little while. And then we came into the second week of September, actually about where we are now, and we were tracking Hurricane Francine here in the New Orleans and surrounding areas. That made landfall here in a couple days, around September 11th or so for the New Orleans and surrounding areas. And then, boy, things went wild. The rest of September, we had something every day. We all remember Helene, how horrible Helene was inland, the flooding. And then we get into October, and we're not done. We have Kirk as a Cat 4 out in the Atlantic, Leslie. And then we have one of the strongest hurricanes since Wilma in the Gulf last year. It was Milton. Remember, that was in October. And then we still had storms. We went all the way to the R storm last year. And so a lot of times what happens is we have these big voids for like a month of not much happening, and then the atmosphere, it's like it flips a switch, and all of a sudden we're tracking these Cat 4s and Cat 5s. Now, the rest of this season, there is a lot of uncertainty on how much activity we're going to get. I do think we're going to add some more. Now, whether it ends up this busy, we aren't seeing a lot of support for that, but again, these things are tricky to nail down, and I use this as an example to remind you that October is very much hurricane season. We see some big hurricanes in October. Hurricane Michael. I mean, these are Cat 5s that I'm naming off that have been threats to Florida, and they all came in the month of October. Heck, we've had a Category 3 in New Orleans for a couple days before Halloween back in 2020. Now, 2020 and 2005 are the weird anomaly seasons here for the hurricane season that are extremely rare, but they can happen. And so just showing you that we're probably not done with hurricane season, but let's enjoy it being nice and quiet out there while we have it. That's going to do it for your tropical weather impact on this Tuesday, September the 9th. We'll head into the peak of the season tomorrow without any fanfare, but we will have the latest for you, an update tomorrow. On your Wednesday, we'll see you here, same place, same time.